The door was never fully closed. It always stayed slightly open, just enough to let a thin line of darkness slip into the room. Just enough for someone to stand there and watch without being seen. Emma never noticed it, or maybe she noticed it once and chose to forget. The way people forget things that feel too strange to understand. Every night, at exactly 11:47 p.m., she would walk down the narrow hallway, her steps soft against the cold wooden floor, her breath slow and careful, as if the house itself was listening. She never turned on the lights. She didn't need them. She knew the path by heart. Knew exactly where the floor creaked, where the walls felt closer, where the air turned colder. When she reached the door, she would pause for a moment, her fingers hovering near the handle, not touching it yet, like she needed permission from something unseen. Then slowly, quietly, she would push it open and slip inside. The room always felt different from the rest of the house. Heavier, like it was holding on to something old. In the corner stood the piano, worn but still strong, its surface catching the faint glow of moonlight that slipped through the window. Emma would sit down without making a sound, her posture small, almost fragile, like she was trying not to take up space. Her hands would rise slowly and stop just above the keys. That was always the hardest moment. Not playing, but deciding to play. Her fingers would tremble slightly, not because she didn't know what to do, but because she knew exactly what would happen when she started. The silence would break, and once it broke, there was no way to put it back together again. Then, finally, one note. Soft, almost invisible. It didn't fill the room. It just touched it, gently, like asking, "Is this okay?" The sound lingered for a second. Then Emma would close her eyes, take a slow breath, and press another key, and then another. The melody would begin to form, fragile at first, like something learning how to exist. This was the only time she felt real. Not at school, where her name was often forgotten or mispronounced. Not at home, where conversations were short and cold. Not in the world outside that seemed to move too fast for someone like her. Only here, in the quiet, with the piano, she felt like she had a voice. And the strange thing was, she had never told anyone she could play. At school, Emma was invisible in a way that people rarely notice. She wasn't bullied. She wasn't loud. She wasn't anything that caught attention. She was just there. Sitting in the last row, her notebook always neat, her answers always correct but never spoken unless she was asked directly. Teachers would pause sometimes, trying to remember her name, their eyes scanning the class like she was hidden among the others. "Emily," they would say, and she would gently reply, "Emma," with a small, polite smile that never reached her eyes. They would nod, correct themselves, and move on. It happened so often that she stopped feeling embarrassed. It just became normal. Like being overlooked was part of who she was. Lunch was the quietest part of her day. She would sit at the edge of the cafeteria, her tray barely touched, her eyes focused on nothing in particular. Around her, laughter echoed. Conversations overlapped. Chairs scraped loudly against the floor, but none of it reached her. It was like she was sitting behind invisible glass, watching a world she wasn't part of. Sometimes, she would look up, just for a second, hoping someone might notice her, might smile, might say something simple like, "Hey." But it never happened. So she stopped looking. She learned how to eat quickly, how to leave early, how to exist without being seen. And slowly, she started believing that maybe she wasn't meant to be seen at all. At home, things were even quieter. The kind of quiet that doesn't feel peaceful. It feels heavy. Her stepfather rarely spoke unless it was necessary, and when he did, his voice carried a weight that made words feel like rules instead of conversation. "Don't go in that room," he had said once, pointing toward the storage room at the back of the house. He didn't explain why. He didn't need to. The way he said it was enough. Emma nodded, like she always did, and never asked questions. Her mother used to be different. Warm, gentle, full of music. But that was a long time ago, before things changed, before the piano was locked away, before silence became the loudest thing in the house. For months, Emma stayed away from that room. She listened. She obeyed. She buried the part of herself that remembered what it felt like to play. But some things don't disappear. They wait. Quietly. Patiently. And one night, something inside her finally broke, not loudly, not in a way anyone else could hear, but deep enough that she couldn't ignore it anymore. It wasn't anger. It wasn't sadness. It was something in between, a feeling that if she didn't open that door, she might lose something she could never get back. So, se dit. That first night, her hands were shaking as she touched the piano. Not because she was afraid of getting caught, but because she was afraid of remembering. The first note felt unfamiliar, like meeting someone after a long time and not knowing what to say. But the second note came easier, and the third, and slowly the music returned, like it had never really left her. That night, she only played for a few minutes before rushing out, her heart pounding, her breath uneven. She told herself it was a mistake, that it wouldn't happen again. But the next night, at 11:47 p.m., she was back. And then it became a habit, a secret routine. Every night, the same time, the same quiet steps, the same pause at the door. But the music changed. It grew. It became deeper, fuller, more honest. Some nights, it sounded like a whisper, soft and careful, like she was afraid someone might hear. Other nights, it carried a hidden weight, something heavier, something she didn't understand but needed to release. The piano became her voice, her only way of saying the things she couldn't put into words. And all this time, she believed she was alone. Until the night everything felt different. It started with something small. So small she almost ignored it. A sound. Not from the piano. Not from her. Something behind her. She paused mid-note, her fingers still hovering above the keys as the last sound faded into silence. Her heart began to beat a little faster. She tilted her head slightly, listening. Nothing. Just the quiet. She let out a slow breath and shook her head, trying to convince herself it was nothing. Old houses make noise. Wood shifts. Pipes creak. It's normal. She placed her fingers back on the keys and began to play again. But this time the music felt different. Slower, more careful, like she was no longer alone in the room. Then it happened again. A soft shift, almost like someone adjusting their weight. Emma froze. This time, she didn't try to ignore it. Slowly, very slowly, she turned her head toward the door. It was still slightly open, just like every night. But now, the darkness beyond it felt deeper, thicker, like it wasn't empty anymore. Her chest tightened, her breath shallow. "Is someone there?" she whispered, her voice barely strong enough to exist. No answer. Just silence. But the silence didn't feel empty anymore. It felt occupied. Seconds passed, stretching longer than they should. Then something moved. Not clearly. Not enough to understand. Just a shift. A shadow where nothing should be. Emma's body went still. Her mind raced, trying to make sense of it, trying to find a logical explanation, something safe, something normal. But deep down, she already knew. This wasn't the first time. Whoever or whatever was there had been there before. Watching, listening, standing in that same quiet space while she played, while she poured everything she had into the music, believing no one was there to hear it. Her secret wasn't hers anymore. Her hands slowly dropped from the keys, her fingers cold now. The room felt smaller, tighter, like the walls had moved closer without her noticing. "Who's there?" she asked again, louder this time, but her voice still trembled. No answer. The shadow didn't leave, it stayed. And that was the part that made her heart race even faster. If it was nothing, it would disappear. But it didn't. Emma stood up slowly, her legs weak beneath her. Her eyes never left the door. She took one careful step forward, then another. The floor creaked under her weight, the sound louder than it should have been, echoing through the silence like a warning. She reached the door, her hand lifting slowly, stopping just inches away from it. The same hesitation to some fear, just like before she touched the piano. Because she knew, once she opened it fully, there would be no going back. The truth would be there, waiting. And And this time, it wasn't just about music anymore. Her fingers pressed against the door. She pushed it open. And what stood on the other side made her forget how to breathe. The door opened slowly, and for a brief second, there was nothing, just the quiet hallway, still and empty, like it had always been. Emma's chest rose and fell in uneven breaths as she stared into the darkness, trying to convince herself that it was all in her head. Maybe the shadow was nothing. Maybe the sound was just the house settling, the way old wood shifts at night. Her fingers tightened around the edge of the door, and she almost stepped back, almost closed it and returned to the safety of pretending she was alone. But then, something moved. Not fast, not sudden, just enough to break the illusion of emptiness. A figure stepped slightly forward, and Emma froze. Her heart stopped for a moment before slamming hard against her chest. She didn't scream. She didn't run. She just stood there, unable to look away. It was her stepfather, but something about him felt different. He wasn't angry. He wasn't rushing toward her. He wasn't even looking at her the way he usually did. His eyes were fixed on the piano, like that was the only thing that mattered. A long silence stretched between them, heavy and fragile. Emma waited for the moment to break, for his voice to turn sharp, for the anger she had always expected to finally arrive. But it didn't. Instead, he spoke in a quiet tone that felt almost unfamiliar. "How long?" he asked. The question was simple, but it made her chest tighten. Emma swallowed, her voice barely steady. I don't know." He stepped a little closer, the dim light touching his face, just enough to reveal something she had never seen before. Not anger, not coldness, but distance. Like he was somewhere far away in his own thoughts. "I heard it," he said softly. Emma's fingers curled into her palms. "When?" she asked, her voice small. He looked at the piano again before answering. "The first time. I thought I imagined it." But then it came again and again. Each word sank into her like a weight. All those nights, all those quiet moments she believed belonged only to her. They had never been hers. Alone, someone had been there, listening. "I wasn't trying to," she began, but he gently raised his hand. "Don't," he said, not harsh, not angry. Just enough to stop her. Emma fell silent again. The air between them felt thin, like it could break if either of them said the wrong thing. For a moment, he didn't look at her. He just stood there, listening to the silence, as if the music was still playing somewhere in the room. Then, unexpectedly, he spoke again. "Play." Emma blinked, confused. "What? Play?" he repeated. A little firmer this time. Her heart started racing again. But now it was mixed with confusion. "I can't," she whispered. He looked at her then, directly, his gaze steady but not cold. "You can." The words settled into the room quietly, but they carried something unfamiliar, something that felt almost like belief. Emma hesitated before slowly turning back toward the piano. Each step felt heavier than the last. When she sat down, her hands rested in her lap, still unsure. The silence felt different now. Not empty, but full of something waiting. He was behind her, watching. Not hidden anymore. Not real. Her fingers lifted slowly, hovering over the keys. But this time, they didn't feel free. They felt exposed, like every note would be seen, understood, maybe even judged. "I'll mess up," she whispered. "You always do," he replied quietly. Her chest tightened at the words, but before the doubt could take over, he added, "But you keep going." Something about that made her pause. It wasn't criticism. It wasn't cold. It was true. She pressed the first key. The sound echoed softly through the room. Then another, and another. The melody began again, slow and careful, like stepping onto unfamiliar ground. At first, her playing felt restrained, like she was holding something back. But slowly, note by note, the music started to open. It grew warmer, deeper, more honest. Her hands moved with more confidence, her fingers no longer hesitating. The piano responded, filling the space with something real, something alive. Emma forgot about the fear, forgot about being watched. Or maybe she stopped caring. The music carried her, pulling out everything she had kept hidden her quiet days. Her loneliness, the feeling of being unseen. It all flowed into the sound without needing words. Behind her, he didn't interrupt. He didn't move. He just listened. And for the first time, he wasn't standing there as someone guarding the room. He was there as someone hearing what it held. The melody continued, rising and falling, soft in some moments, heavier in others. Time blurred. Seconds stretched into something longer, something deeper. When the final note finally faded, Emma's hands stayed on the keys. Her breath was uneven, her chest rising slowly as the silence returned. But it wasn't the same silence as before. It felt full, like the music had left something behind. She turned her head slightly. He was still there, but something had changed. His expression wasn't distant anymore. There was something in his eyes now, something softer, something that looked almost like it had been hidden for a long time. He stepped forward slowly, his gaze still fixed on the piano. "I told you not to come in here," he said quietly. Emma's heart sank. "I know," she replied softly. For a moment, it felt like everything might go back to the way it was. But then he continued, his voice lower this time. "I didn't say that because I didn't want anyone to play." Emma looked at him, confused. "Then why?" she asked. He didn't answer right away. His eyes moved across the room, stopping at the piano, then at the floor. "Because I couldn't," he finally said. Emma frowned slightly. "Couldn't what?" "Play." The word hung in the air. He stepped closer, his hand hovering near the piano, but he didn't touch it. "I used to," he said quietly, "a long time ago." Emma stayed still, listening. "After your mother," he paused, his voice fading for a moment. He didn't finish the sentence, but Emma understood. The silence between them deepened, but it no longer felt cold. It felt shut. "I couldn't sit here anymore," he continued. "Every time I tried, it felt empty." His fingers brushed lightly against the edge of the piano before pulling back, so I closed the door. Emma's chest tightened, but in a different way now. Not fear. Understanding. "I didn't know you could play," he added softly. Emma looked down at the keys. "I learned from her." He nodded slowly. Another quiet moment passed between them. But it didn't feel uncomfortable anymore. "You shouldn't stop," he said suddenly. Emma looked up, surprised. "What? Don't stop playing?" he repeated. She stared at him, unsure if she believed what she was hearing. "But you said I was wrong." The words came without hesitation. Emma didn't speak. She just looked at him, trying to understand this version of him that she had never seen before. "4 months, I stood there," he said, his voice low, listening. Her heart skipped. "I didn't know why I didn't stop you." He paused briefly. "Now, Ido." The room felt warmer now, like something had shifted, something invisible but real. Emma looked down at the piano again, her reflection faint in the surface. For the first time, she didn't feel like she had to hide. But just as that feeling began to settle, a sound came from the hallway. Clear. Not soft this time. Footsteps. Both of them turned toward the door at the same moment. Emma's heart jumped again. The footsteps grew closer, slow and careful, stopping just outside the room. A shadow appeared in the doorway, smaller this time, unfamiliar. Emma's breath caught in her throat. Her fingers tightened slightly. "Who is that?" she whispered. The shadow didn't move. It just stood there, silent, watching. The shadow didn't move. It stayed there, small, still, almost fragile. Emma's heart pounded as her eyes tried to adjust. Then slowly, the figure stepped forward into the light. It was a little boy, no older than 10, barefoot, quiet, nervous. Emma blinked in confusion. She had never seen him before. The boy looked at the piano, not at them. His eyes were wide, almost shining, like he had been waiting for this moment for a long time. "I heard it," he said softly. His voice trembled. "I hear it every night." The room went completely still. Emma's stepfather didn't speak. Ehusk started, as if something inside him had been pulled back from a place he had buried. "I thought it was a dream," the boy continued, taking a small step inside. "But it wasn't." Emma felt something shift inside her chest. The boy looked at her now. "Can you play again?" Not a demand, not pressure, just hope. Emma glanced at her stepfather. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then slowly, he nodded. That was enough. Emma turned back to the piano. This time, her hands didn't shake. She pressed the first key. The sound filled the room soft, warm, alive, and something changed. Not loudly, not suddenly, but quietly, deeply. The boy sat on the floor, listening like it was the most important thing in the world. Her stepfather stood still, his eyes no longer distant. For the first time, they weren't alone. The music continued, wrapping around all of them, filling the spaces that silence once owned. And in that moment, Emma understood something simple. Some secrets are not meant to be hidden. Some songs are meant to be heard. Even in the quietest nights, someone is always listening.